Thanks for showing up today. It's great to see so many people. Akemi and I have collaborated to talk about our experiences, combined 70 years, I think it is, in the IT industry, though I'm still 30, so I'll let you work out how old Akemi is. It's complicated.
All right. So, and on top of that, I'm a woman of visible minority background, short, middle-aged. So people would think I would naturally know how to be inclusive, but I find it very difficult, and I had to learn a lot of things, so I am really excited to share some of those learnings with you today.
Thanks, Akemi. Yeah, Rashee Harvey, I've been both a male in a male-only situation, and I've been excluded, and I am now identified female, and I'm also experienced not being included. And I say that because inclusivity is really about everybody. It's not about one small demographic. And if you're a middle-aged white male, it might be that you've got some really valuable ideas to bring along as well. I've been in the industry for quite a while, and I think I would say that my last 5 years in being Rashee and being identified this way have taught me more than the previous 35. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you today. Perhaps some quick definitions of terms, because we don't have lots of time here, but what's diversity, what's inclusion? Rather than getting to sort of scientific definitions, you might have seen this 𝒍𝒊𝒌𝒆 quote that diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. When I go, my kids take me out, they tell me I'm too old to dance, but the point is, companies seem to be putting a lot of effort into creating diverse workforces. But what are they actually doing to empower those workforces? So if you've got lots of diversity, that's great, but if you don't put the right kind of systems in place, as we'll see, you won't get the diversity, you won't get the value of inclusivity. We love this quote because we could have gone and said, what is inclusive leadership? You've got the 5 C's, the 4 C's, the 6 C's. And we were just hearing about C's in the previous talk, but different kinds of C's. And inclusive leadership creates an environment where people feel that they can actually express dissent. That's pretty important. It was for a number of space shuttles disasters, where they can bring their ideas to the table, where they feel they are valued. What I say matters. And from 𝒃𝒂 talking to the wonderful Brené Brown about what inclusive leadership is. Everybody has a role to play, and we were hearing earlier on about we're all leaders. We're at different times. I love Steve's talk. In fact, I think he's probably used half of our stuff, which I'm going to kind of get involved in legal with. But why do it? It's not easy. It's not easy. And you hear people say, "Oh, it's not rocket science." If everybody says that to you in a meeting and it's talking about how people collaborate and work together, I want you to think this, that rocket science, if you feed in the same parameters to it, will give you the coefficients at the other end relative to that equation that you're going in. People, though, if you ask them on a Monday, will they be doing something, by Friday they forgot about it or it's created some contention. It's much, much, much harder than rocket science. And why do we want to be inclusive anyway? Because it drives innovation. We were hearing that, innovation. Lots of talk about innovation, ideas. Imagine that we was on a spaceship, it's on fire, it's burning up. We want as many ideas and collaboration as we possibly can get to save ourselves. And that spaceship could be planet Earth. Why would you want to exclude people? You want to kind of encourage those ideas. We need those ideas. But why is it difficult? Why is inclusive leadership so difficult? Well, it's personal, it's different perspectives. In fact, I love that we've been using perspective, I think, as a word. And we came up with a definition of empathy when we try to think that we understand somebody's situation. Where you say with empathy, it's actually appreciating how other people feel. Whereas with emotional intelligence, it's actually the ability to control your own and others' emotions. But why is it difficult? It's deeply personal, it's dynamic, it changes, we have moods, and we are transient in the way that we show up. And quality feedback, if you're not included, you often don't get a chance to give it. And when, you know, when your boss comes in and says, how good am I? How inclusive am I? I'm good, right? You might be slightly wanting to give an answer that perhaps isn't totally honest and transparent in that awkward situation. And quantitative feedback, you know, three people gave 5 stars to something on Amazon, and 9 people gave 4.5 stars. Which product are you going to go for? You know, it's difficult, it's relative, and it's not particularly necessarily helpful, because being an inclusive leader is the essence. It's about an aura of being inclusive. So we thought we'd bring the Agile flavour here, and Kemi's going to take us through some of how do we see these inclusive challenges surface in the Agile context.
Yep, pass the button. So let's start with sprint planning. So new sprint, exciting times, right? But at the same time, your team is dealing with a high level of uncertainty, right? You have a group of people from different backgrounds, different personalities, and different ways of processing information. And you add uncertainty on top of that. So your team could be quite divergent at this point. But sprint planning is a time-boxed event, so there is a bit of time pressure. So the challenge is, how do you bring your team to an agreement without excluding people? So the inclusive behaviors that we have seen is, within teams, is people with more experience tend to dominate the conversation. And also, speaking of neurotypical and neurodivergent thinking, is that some people can think very quickly, right? Or some people, like myself, I actually need to write things down for me to process information. Rashee, you might have noticed, she does oral processing, right? So you know, sometimes people who do oral processing, or people who can think very quickly, start discussing things before other people are actually ready. They're still processing information. So that's something that, you know, that can keep people from really, you know, participating. Experience bias is really not about how much experience people have, but if you have done something similar, you feel like you know this, right? So this, I know how this should be done. So that also excludes other people. And not to mention time pressure. Instead of seeking clarity, seeking understanding, maybe, you know, your team tends to rush to a conclusion. So how do we deal with that? Give people time to think before they start talking. Put people in pairs if you have time. That helps people kind of run their ideas, vocalize them, validate their understandings of the stories, etc. So that really helps with different ways of processing information. And help your team master the art of good enough. Don't aim for perfection. But we both have an experience working in environments where the team's initial estimate is taking us the ultimate commitment. So as leaders, work with your stakeholders, you know, help them understand that there is always uncertainty, right? That takes pressure off your team. And if there is a major disagreement about a story, you know, or design during sprint planning, make sure to revisit that in the retro. You know, there may be some new learning for the team, but also that makes people feel heard and understood, right? We don't just say, well, your view is unpopular, so we'll just move on, but we'll give a chance to, you know, speak, right? So moving on to sprint retro, so at this point, what we see teams deal with is vulnerability. They feel like, you know, they're not confident enough to speak up, right? Or afraid that they may be blamed for something. And what we see happening is when people are tired, especially from a challenging sprint, they're less patient, they're less sensitive, they don't really pick up on, you know, nonverbals or give people time to express themselves. So that because of that, people tend to kind of resort to mental shortcuts, biases, right? Come in, and attribution theory, which is where you see cause and effect relationships where they don't really exist. Like if you happen to be standing close to an issue, people might think, hey, that you caused this, right? Our brain likes to just make conclusions very quickly. So, you need to watch for that. And not open to seeing different perspectives. I mean, different perspectives is why we have diversity. But if someone is holding on to their narrative of what happened, especially you had a challenging sprint, and that person really insists on holding on to that that narrative, that becomes just a battle of who is right and wrong. So you need to watch for that as well. So we deal with that typically by setting the stage. This is basic stuff, but no personal attacks, use evidence. I personally like to start with reconstruction of a timeline of events before we start talking about what's wrong and what's right? Just get the facts, get the events, make sure agree on when, what happened when. Then just let them help them realize different perspectives are really why we're here, right? And perspectives are really based on people's identity, values, experiences. So if people remember the same event differently, it doesn't mean that they're wrong or that, it's just how it is. And this is probably the only time we would encourage the use of I, such as, this is how I remember, this happening, as opposed to saying, this is what happened, as if you're speaking for the entire team, right? Set example by sharing your vulnerability. If you felt like you failed in any way, supporting your team or something, just own up. So that they see you doing that, it builds trust. And acknowledge negative emotions as well as positive emotions. If you ignore negative emotions like disappointment, anger, they keep coming back because they want to be acknowledged. Acknowledge them, don't let them ruin the retro, but acknowledge them so they can move on. So moving on to our favorite topic, sprinting crisis, hair is on fire. Let's say your team is struggling with something, and it's likely that they're not going to deliver what they promised to deliver, right? So this has impact on the customer, your internal stakeholders, and your internal stakeholders are coming out of the woodwork, demanding that you put the sprint back on track. But what you notice is like team, when there is a crisis, they're actually more hyper-focused and they're more together than usual. But you may be feeling stressed. You may be feeling a bit vulnerable. So what do you do? So this part will focus more on you as a leader than what's going on with the team. So fight or flight, of course, that could lead to command and control behavior, like going back to being a project manager. Stress-induced deliberation to intuition is your automatic response to a stimuli. It's really hard to control because you're under pressure, you stop thinking, you stop seeking, alternative options, ideas. You just reach inside to your intuition, and intuition will tell you what to do based on what worked in the past. So this may work, right? If you're in a burning house, well, get out, right? But this may be, you're losing out on the opportunity to leverage the collective brain power that's in your team. So we deal with that by just letting the team focus on what they need to do, stay customer focused, and just this is about teamwork, right? But as a leader, pause before reacting. It's easier said than done. We understand that. I mean, how can you control your automatic responses when they happen so quickly and you don't even know that's happening, right? And how do you know when to trust your intuition and when not to trust your intuition? So this last point really led us to our lessons learned, and Rashee will take you through them.
Thanks, Akemi. Anybody seen the Simpsons movie here? Anyone at all? One person. Do you remember there's a scene in there where he goes to Alaska and he's got the husky dogs, and you see that scene where he's going, walk, walk, run, run, sleep, sleep. And it's a bit like that in a crisis situation where, you know, invent, innovate, solve. And something that I just wanted to add a point you were saying the other day is
pressure.
Just get away from it. Because the irony isn't it, is the team actually just want to get on and solve the problem. But of course we feel, or perhaps as leaders sometimes, we feel we're on the hook. And just that manager almost running on the pitch to try and score the goal. It's hard, and there's trust is involved, but you think you know better because I've been in the industry for 40 years, I must know. Not at all, no.
40 years, come on.
Okay,
no, you slip.
Yes, I'm not the young chick here.
All right, let's move on.
So, what were the lessons that we've learned around that? Is that number one is to know ourselves. And Eugene, you were talking about, it's not all about the big I am, it's not about us, it's actually, you have to get the gift of self-awareness, which sounds like a corny kind of coaching tip, but it's something that's quite amazing to get that and be able to control it. And we were talking about automatic responses, and we were talking about the crisis situation where you have to train yourself not to panic and to react and to control that amygdala. And we think from an inclusive leadership perspective, we're talking about making sure everybody can challenge you as a leader. You know, back in the day when I was in a finance company, if I've got an idea that's not your idea, I think of something else, I'd be fired. We see that fear-driven organisation, and so people think about, I'm not going to try and fail fast, I don't want to fail at all. Who wants to fail? And so this continuous learning doesn't happen, and so innovation doesn't happen. So we need to know about our biases and our preferences, get some coaching to create some space to learn about those things, but that self-awareness, I think that's the gift. I do feel as you get a bit older, I'm not saying a lot old usually, but as you get a little bit older into your career, I do sense that I'm a little bit more relaxed. I don't have to own the solution, and I am not the hero. Our gift is that we can empower others by stopping here and actually to pause. And a big point here, we talk about empathy, and we've heard about perspectives everywhere. Empathy to us is a deep curiosity about multiple perspectives. That's what we want. That's how you innovate. That's how you survive. And you don't become one of the 84% of Fortune 500 companies that have gone out of business because they didn't want to make a mistake. They didn't want to learn those lessons. And then these structures are vitally important. How many times have you seen collaboration as a key goal? No collaboration software, no whiteboards, no ideas. You haven't got your principles. We were early on about team charters. We were hearing about the hot wash. I love that hot wash that we were hearing about this morning, where everybody needs to feel that they can point out something and that they have that structure. Put inclusive leadership in your design principles is probably one of the things that we would like to really leave you with.
You probably don't, yeah.
Between the stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And it's then when you can stop. So if you could take one thing away from today, we would love you the next time that you feel really hacked off by something, somewhere, to feel those hackles going up and just give yourself a space before you react to them. And we think that would create a more inclusive leadership style. So if there's one thing that you've taken away from us today, we hope it's that. Thank you very much.